I have a phrase for you today that feels like it was basically engineered in a lab to start a massive argument at a dinner party.
Oh, I love these.
Yeah, it's emotional promiscuity. And I'll be honest, when I first saw the title of the source material you sent over, I thought we were doing some sort of, retro cosmopolitan quiz from 1998.
Right, like an Are You Loving Too Much kind of vibe.
Exactly. But once I actually opened the documents, specifically that pretty chaotic Wikipedia entry, I realized we aren't just looking at a pop culture buzzword, we're looking at a battlefield.
It really is. It's a classic case of one single term being fought over by two completely different groups of people, groups who honestly have absolutely nothing in common.
Yeah, you have the popular press definition on one side, which is heavily rooted in a very specific religious morality. And then on the other side, you have the scientific literature.
And the scientific side is just trying to turn it into a measurable, descriptive psychological trait. But they are both using the exact same words to describe totally different human experiences.
Which makes the Wikipedia page for this a total mess. It's flagged for multiple issues, which I always love seeing. It's like the digital version of police tape.
It's trying to build a bridge between two wildly different sources.
Right. It connects a book from 2007 by Brienne Murk called Avoiding the Heartbreak and Emotional Promiscuity with a scientific thesis from 2011 by Daniel Jones.
And honestly, those 4 years between 2007 and 2011, they might as well be a century in terms of how differently they approach the human mind.
So for today's deep dive, here is our mission. We need to figure out if emotional promiscuity is this moral failing where you need to guard your heart, or if it's just a neutral personality setting.
Like being an introvert or an extrovert.
Exactly. And more importantly for you listening, I want to get to the end of this research stack. Because the science actually suggests that falling in love too fast is a literal physical health hazard.
That link to physical health is the real pivot point of this whole topic. But to understand why it's physically dangerous, we first have to understand what it actually is.
And that depends entirely on who you ask. So let's start with the 2007 definition. We're looking at Brienne Murk's book. I read through this, and it is not a subtle text.
No, it is highly prescriptive.
Yeah, it's telling you exactly how to live your life. And we should be clear, this is written from a very specific Christian point of view. The tone is intense.
It falls squarely into what we call the purity culture framework. In this author's worldview, emotional promiscuity is something to be actively avoided.
It's the habit of allowing yourself to feel romantic connections with too many people.
Right, and Murk argues that doing this, indulging in these feelings, dilutes your ability to bond with your future spouse.
The phrase that kept popping up in the text was guarding the heart.
Guarding the heart, yes.
It essentially treats your heart like a bank vault. You have a limited, finite amount of emotional currency, and if you spend it on high school crushes or casual flings...
You're bankrupting your future marriage.
Exactly. But there's a deeper claim here that I found really interesting. Murk's whole argument rests on the idea that emotions themselves cannot be trusted.
Yes. It takes a very strict view on self-regulation. The book essentially argues that your internal check engine light is broken.
So you need to manually override it with these strict rules.
Precisely. It views emotional openness as a gateway drug. The argument is that if you allow yourself to be emotionally promiscuous, sharing deep secrets, dreaming about a future, feeling that intense connection, you are inevitably going to slide into sexual promiscuity.
The classic slippery slope argument.
Right. First, you're sharing your hopes and dreams, and the next thing you know, you've crossed a physical line that the author views as immoral outside of marriage.
So the solution, according to this 2007 text, is to just cut it off at the source. Don't even let the feelings start. Set strict physical and emotional boundaries.
Which is a fascinating theory of the mind, because it assumes you have total conscious control over the onset of an emotion.
It suggests falling in love is a conscious choice you make. Or rather, a mistake you make by not keeping your guard up high enough.
And I think anyone who has ever developed a crush on someone they shouldn't, like a boss or a friend's partner, knows that the feeling part doesn't really ask for your permission.
No, it just happens. But Murk's point is that indulging that feeling is the moral failure. It's a lack of discipline.
Exactly. So that is the prescriptive religious view. Emotional promiscuity is a behavior you need to stop.
Okay, so that's the chapel's view. But then we fast forward to 2011, the lab doors open, enter Daniel Jones and his colleagues.
And they pick up this exact same term, dust it off, and say, actually, let's measure this.
And this is where the definition totally flips. Jones isn't interested in whether it's good or bad morally. He wants to know if it's a stable psychological trait.
Right, he moves it from being descriptive to weight, from prescriptive to descriptive. He defines emotional promiscuity as the predisposition to fall in love easily, fast, and often.
Easily, fast, and often. It sounds like a marketing slogan.
It really does.
Mm-hmm.
But the key here is that he separates this from behavior. It's about how your brain naturally processes attachment. It's about loving the feeling of falling in love.
And he didn't just theorize about it, he actually operationalized it. He created a metric called the Emotional Promiscuity Scale, the EP scale.
Yes.
I looked at some of the questions on this scale. They ask things like, I feel romantic connections almost immediately, or I fall in love with people I hardly know.
It's essentially a test to see how hair-trigger your love response is.
But there is a massive nuance here that usually gets lost in the cultural conversation, and I know you spotted this in the source material.
The distinction between emotional and sexual promiscuity.
Yes, because in Murk's book, and honestly in most people's minds, those two things are glued together. If you do one, you automatically do the other.
But the scientific data, specifically citing research by Simpson and Gangestad from 1991, says they are entirely distinct metrics.
They are totally separate.
They're correlated, meaning they often show up in the same people, but they are not the same mechanism.
This was my biggest aha moment. You can score off the charts on the EP scale, falling in love every week, writing poetry, feeling that intense soulmate bond, and yet have a sexual partner count of 0.
Absolutely. You can be a serial faller and lover, but be completely celibate. Because you are addicted to the romance, not necessarily the physical act.
And the reverse is true too, right?
Yes, there are sociosexual individuals who score very high on sexual promiscuity, but very low on emotional promiscuity. They have many physical partners, but rarely, if ever, feel that swooning in love sensation.
So they are operating on pure biology, whereas the emotionally promiscuous person is operating on fantasy.
Fantasy and dopamine.
Yeah.
But there is another major distinction we need to clear up, because listeners might be hearing this and thinking, wait, isn't this just anxious attachment?
I will admit that was my first thought. If you fall in love instantly with strangers, it sounds like you're just terrified of being alone.
It is a super common mix-up. But Jones cites Hazan and Shaver's 1987 work on attachment styles to show the psychological drivers are completely different. Anxious attachment is fear-based. It's a please don't leave me signal. It's driven by a deep fear of abandonment. You cling to someone because you are afraid of the void.
So anxious attachment is running away from pain.
Correct. But emotional promiscuity is reward-based. It is running toward pleasure.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, these people aren't necessarily scared. They are thrilled. They love the high of the spark. They aren't clinging to you because they feel broken. They are clinging to you because you are the newest source of that specific emotional rush.
That is such a crucial difference. One is, I need you to survive. And the other is, wow, this feeling is amazing. Let's go.
Precisely. The emotionally promiscuous person is often quite confident. They just have a very, very low threshold for what they consider love.
Okay, so we've established this is a personality trait. Some people are just wired to be romantic drag racers. 0 to 60 in 3 seconds.
And if we stop the research there, it would just be an interesting psychological fun fact.
Right, just a quirky trait. But we don't stop there. Because in 2012, Jones and Paulus did a follow-up study that takes this out of the theoretical realm and into the emergency room.
This is where we hit the dangerous intersection.
Yeah, this part genuinely startled me. We just talked about how emotional and sexual promiscuity are on different scales, but some people do score high on both.
The dual high scores.
Exactly. And the research found that if you are in that group, meaning you fall in love fast and you are also comfortable with casual sex, you are significantly more likely to engage in unprotected sex.
Yes. It creates a very specific vulnerability to physical health risks.
Having a lot of partners is one thing, but having many unprotected partners is a massive health hazard.
And the reason why this happens is the most important insight of the whole deep dive. It isn't just because they are impulsive, it's a cognitive mechanism.
The study calls it premature trust.
Premature trust.
Because normally we assume people have unprotected casual sex because they are maybe under the influence, or they just don't care about the risks, or they get carried away in the moment.
That is the standard societal assumption. But Jones and Paulus argue that for the dual high, emotionally promiscuous person, it isn't about not caring. It's that their brain has literally tricked them into thinking the situation is safe.
Walk us through that glitch. How does the feeling of falling in love make your brain think someone doesn't have an STI?
Think about how trust is normally built in a standard relationship. It's a slow accumulation of data over time.
Right.
You see how someone handles stress, you meet their friends, you learn their relationship history. Over a period of months, your brain gathers data and says, okay, This person is safe. We can let our guard down.
So trust is essentially a vetting process.
Exactly. But for the emotionally promiscuous person, the intense feeling of intimacy arrives almost instantly. They meet someone, they have a deep 2-hour conversation, the dopamine floods their system, and they feel that instant soulmate sensation.
And because that intense sensation mimics the feeling of long-term love,
The brain assumes the vetting process has already happened. It completely conflates emotional intensity with actual security. The subconscious logic goes like this. I feel incredibly close to this person, therefore I must really know them. If I know them, they wouldn't hurt me. If they wouldn't hurt me, I don't need protection.
that is terrifying. It's a literal hallucination of safety.
It is a massive cognitive error. They aren't being self-destructive on purpose. They are acting entirely rationally based on a reality that their own emotions have fabricated.
They genuinely feel safe with a total stranger just because their internal love dial is turned up to 11.
Yes.
It's like giving the keys to your house to a guy you just met at a bar simply because he has a really trustworthy smile. You feel great about it, but the physical lock on your door does not care about your feelings.
That is the perfect analogy. The virus, the bacteria, they don't care about the romance.
Wait.
They don't care that you feel like you've known this person in a past life. Biology is brutal that way.
And this brings us back in a really weird full circle way to Brienne Murk and that religious book from 2007.
It really does.
Because Murk started this whole conversation by claiming emotions cannot be trusted,
Right.
she meant it in a purely spiritual sense, that unvetted emotions lead to moral failing. But now the scientists in 2012 are looking at the data and saying emotions cannot be trusted in a biological sense.
Because unvetted emotions lead to health crises.
Yeah.
It is a harsh convergence. But yes, both sides, despite living in totally different universes, agree on one fundamental thing.
The raw impulse of falling in love is a terrible guide for actual behavior.
Merck says guard your heart. Science says guard your health. But the required mechanism is exactly the same. You have to override the feeling with logic.
You have to insert a manual pause button.
You do. If you know you're someone who scores high on that EP scale, if you tend to swoon hard and fast, you have to intellectually accept that your vibe check is broken.
You cannot trust your gut because your gut is drunk on dopamine.
Exactly. You have to outsource your judgment to protocol. You have to say, I feel like I love this person, but the protocol says we talk about testing before anything happens. You have to be smarter than your own instincts.
Which is, let's be honest, incredibly unromantic.
It's the least romantic thing possible. But it is the only way to navigate the modern dating world safely if you carry this specific personality trait.
I do think that's an empowering way to look at it, though. It takes all the shame out of the equation.
It really does.
Because the religious text relies heavily on shame. It tells you that you are bad for feeling this way. But the scientific view is just, hey, you aren't bad. You are just vulnerable to a specific optical illusion.
Exactly. It removes the moral judgment entirely. You weren't promiscuous in a derogatory sense. You were just high connection.
But high connection comes with high risk.
Yes, it does.
I want to zoom out for a second before we wrap up, because this core concept we uncovered today, this idea of premature trust, once you see it, you really can't unsee it, and I don't think it stops at dating.
How do you mean?
Well, if our brains are biologically wired to mistake liking someone for trusting someone, that has to apply to everything in life. Think about business deals. Think about sales.
Oh, absolutely.
We've all met that one salesperson who is just incredibly charismatic. You feel like you're best friends after 5 minutes of talking to them.
Right.
And you end up buying the expensive extended warranty, or you sign the contract without even reading the fine print. Why? Because of premature trust.
That is spot on. The emotional click overrides the required due diligence. You assume that because the interaction feels so good, the deal itself must be good.
Or even hiring people. You interview a candidate and you just get a really good feeling about them. They seem amazing, so you skip calling their references.
And then 3 months later, you realize they are completely unqualified for the job. It is the exact same psychological mechanism at play.
You conflated interpersonal chemistry with professional competence.
It really suggests that emotional promiscuity might actually be a fantastic lens for looking at how we make bad decisions in general.
We prioritize the immediate emotional payoff over the boring logistical reality.
It tells us that guarding the heart, if we strip away all the religious baggage from that phrase, is actually a crucial critical thinking skill. It's the ability to pause and say, I feel really good about this, but I am going to verify it anyway.
Trust but verify. It worked for the Cold War, and it apparently works for dating and hiring.
It is quite literally the only safety net we have against our own biology.
So, for you listening, here's the big takeaway. If you are the kind of person who falls head over heels in love with a new partner, a new business idea, or even a new hobby every other week,
Enjoy the ride. The feeling is fantastic.
it is, but maybe, just maybe, don't sign the contract or skip the protection until the dopamine actually wears off.
Maintain a very healthy skepticism of your own joy.
Thanks for diving deep with us today. Hopefully, we didn't break your heart, but maybe we saved you a trip to the clinic.
Stay curious and stay safe.
We'll catch you on the next deep dive.